Annabel, yes, there was a heavy police presence from 5 when I came into town. But then businesses still didn't open. We had been told it would be business as usual. We saw the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, post, and I'm pulling it up now, saying he was at the office by 5:15.
Yes.
Let me just find that video in case you hadn't seen it, or you haven't come across it. And should be...
It was actually him walking into his office.
It was him walking into his office.
I believe his security.
Here we go. I found it. Clearly, it was before daybreak.
Yes, it was. It was 5. It was at 5 a.m. actually.
Yeah. So I mean, he was saying, you know, he's going about his business. Okay, let me just play it. But there we go. For many, it was not business as usual, despite the assurances from the executive, despite the heavy police presence. What do you think that is about?
First of all, he's a deputy president. So, of course, it's business as usual for him. Not for the rest of us. I do not get to enjoy the kind of security that he does. Regardless, I went to the office as usual. But like I said, we left early. So our employer just sent a message to the WhatsApp group, and he was like, you know, for the sake of your safety and what have you, you're free to leave early, just before, you know, just in case this situation escalates. And I remember I had to call friends of mine who work in CBD just to confirm, is CBD clear? Because for me to get home, I have to go through CBD whether I want to or not. Now, why were businesses closed? I think I'm a firm believer in calling a spade, and also by virtue of my profession, you know, political affiliation aside, whether I like it or not, there is what we call fidelity to the law. So at the end of the day, no matter what I do, no matter where I am, I have to be true to the provisions of the law. The fact is, demonstrations affiliated to or associated with one Right Honorable Raila Odinga are deemed to be prone to either met out violence or to degenerate into violent protests. So of course Kenyans are not going to take chances with their businesses. I would rather not open as opposed to open and risk harm to my person, risk harm to my property, or even risk losing whatever stock I have brought in. And you and I know with the current economic situation, traders are no longer purchasing goods at the rates that they were used to, which again is advanced as part of the reason for the protests. But people are not willing to risk their lives. People are not willing to risk their businesses. Now, back to what Joyce was saying, that, you know, CS Kindiki said that it would be good for you to tell us. It is not coming from the CS. Like when we're starting, I mentioned the Public Order Act. The Public Order Act says, you guys want to picket, demonstrate, what have you, please go ahead and do so. However, give notice, at the very least, 3 days before you're assembling, to the requisite authorities, which in this case is the police, and not more than 14 days. So anywhere between 14 days to minimum 3 days, you can give them notice. And then in that notice, you're supposed to say that we are going to be assembling at point A between this time and this time. And if it is a stationary assembly, if you're going to be having a procession, meaning you're moving from point A to point B, that notice of yours should also stipulate what routes you plan on using. Now, what is the reason for that? So that police, one, can afford you security, because depending on what agenda you may be propagating, sometimes there may be a faction of people that do not agree with you. So the police are not always, it's not always a question of them being informed so that they can interfere. No, it is for them to also weigh the situation and go like, if Group A is having a procession, and we know Group B and C are feeling a certain type of way about this, there's a likelihood that they may try to intercept Group A. So you will have, police will have to provide you with security so that you can have your procession in peace. The other reason is, one, both the Constitution and the Public Order Act are very clear on the fact that a procession, an assembly, a meeting has to be peaceful. And the people attending that procession, assembly, or meeting have to be unarmed. So again, you've given your notice. The day has come. You're going about your business. If you come armed and the police assess the situation and they're like, there's a likelihood of now you peaceful demonstrators turning violent, which means you pose a threat to yourselves, because when you're throwing stones, it's not a guarantee that if I was aiming at Olive, it'll hit Olive. It may hit somebody else who we were demonstrating with. So if you're either a danger to other people or to yourselves, then the police have the right to intervene. Now, you give notice to Kenyans publicly, orally, and you say that what you're planning is peaceful demonstrations. But in photos and videos, we're seeing you with stones. From the onset, the question now has to become, did you ever at any one time have the intention to be peaceful? Number two, forget law, forget politics. When you study the psychology of mobs in, just mobs themselves in violent situations, if the person leading them or the person calling for them to assemble has adopted a peaceful demeanor, then there's a very high likelihood that the mob itself is going to be peaceful. Malcolm X is one, Gandhi is another. But if
was
the leader...
Malcolm X peaceful?
Yes, to a large extent. So for any time he adopted that bravado demeanor, then the crowd followed suit. Anytime he adopted a pragmatic demeanor, the crowd followed suit. It's there for all to see. So again, if you as a leader, and you command authority, because we're not talking about an individual who does not command authority in this country. He does. I'm not sure even the three of us combined, if we got out here and tried to call Kenyans to attention, we would be able to attract the kind of following that he does. So if you don't adopt a peaceful demeanor, it will not matter that you're telling the rest of the country that we are going to be peaceful, we are not going to damage your property. The minute you make utterances or your body language suggests that it's going to be anything other than peaceful, then the crowd is going to be anything other than peaceful.
So I wanted to ask you, what is a peaceful demeanor? How does one portray a peaceful demeanor?
Well, it is you make it very clear that, guys, we said we're having peaceful protests, okay? And you communicate. So everything, even from your tone, should suggest that what we're having is peaceful protests. That means everybody in your chain of command, because he doesn't operate alone, right? It is an Azimio-affiliated demonstration. So that means every figure of authority or every figure that is associated with the leadership of in the Azimio structure understands and communicates to their followers that, guys, we're not carrying stones, we're not carrying machetes, tunaenda hivi kama tumesimama, and the most you're going to do is probably dance or, just chant 1, 2, 3 and what have you. Now, there's a risk. Perhaps it comes from the fear of, like I said, we have history as a country where even where people were being peaceful, they were handled violently by the police. I mean, when the likes of Wangari Maathai's hair was being yanked off her head, she wasn't harming anybody, right? So perhaps subconsciously, people, even when they're intending to have peaceful demonstrations, they come with that reservation that, but Kenyan cops are Kenyan cops. They may, decide to just swing the other way. So it's best if I am prepared. At least if I throw a stone, those few seconds when they're turning away gives me time to run off for my life. But I would say for the first time, that was last week on Monday, I actually saw Kenyan police exercise restraint. There were some who went overboard, but for the first time I actually felt like Kenyan cops exercise restraint, because I was seeing clips where even police were conversing with Kenyans. They're like, okay, fine, we hear you, but can we just have a conversation and see whether we can amicably come to an agreement? In other places, they just walked alongside them. As long as they're not damaging property, there was no engagement. How we degenerated yesterday is where we should have cause for concern. And that is why I'm saying, and from the onset, where we are at this morning, it is very, very difficult to point fingers at X or to point fingers at Y. From where I sit, both sides handled yesterday extremely wrong. Extremely wrong, especially in those areas where we had scenarios just degenerating. If CBD was peaceful, but it's because this mob never got to CBD, or this crowd never got to CBD. Had they, would we really just be talking about, oh, CBD businesses were closed, or would we be having a conversation of windows were broken because, items were being held left, right, and center? There's room for doubt.